Good evening, everyone. We are the weather is passing, fortunately, and but we did want to be confident that everything was going to be a-okay, and so we'll get started in about 10 or 12 minutes. So just wanted to let y'all know that. We'll be right back.
Kiss of fire. I touch your lips, and all at once the sparks go flying. Those devil lips can know so well the art of lying. And though I see the danger, still the flame grows higher. I know I must surrender to your kiss of fire.
The operation is about to begin. The universe holds its breath at the audacity of man. They all know much, but understand little.
Let it ride out.
Good evening. Please take your seats. The program is about to begin.
trying to get to know you. I'm trying to dance with you. I'm trying to swim with you. All I know is extravagant things, though, man.
Good evening. I'm Jay Barth. I'm the director of the William J. Clinton Presidential Library and Museum. And thank you so much for your patience this evening. But we're all a lot more confident that we're going to be able to stay around for the entire event. Thank you again for joining us for another outstanding event in our Kumpuris Distinguished Lecture series. We are very sad not to be down the street welcoming you at our home at the Clinton Presidential Center, but we are thrilled to be able to pivot and meet here so that everyone who wanted to be part of this event could join us in person. We also welcome our friends who are watching online this evening. Inaugurated in 2007 by President Clinton, the Kumpuris Distinguished Lecture Series has brought foreign heads of state, Nobel laureates, U.S. cabinet secretaries, a U.S. Supreme Court justice, international business leaders, actors, athletes, scholars, and scientists to Little Rock to share their thoughts on some of the most important national and global issues. The Kumpuris Distinguished Lecture Series was established with a gift by the Kumpuris family in honor of their parents, Dr. Frank Kumpuris and Kula Kumpuris. Let us thank the Kumpuris family for this gift to the Clinton Presidential Center and to our community. The Kumpuris Center series is presented by the Clinton School of Public Service, the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton Presidential Library and Museum, and AT&T. And please help me thank AT&T for their commitment to this series. Now for one very mundane but important comment, please silence your cell phones to the greatest ability because things have been going off a little bit tonight. We have numerous current and former public servants in our audience whom we'd acknowledge if we had time, but we must acknowledge just a few of these public servants who are with us this evening. First, Mayor Frank Scott Jr. Congressman French Hill and Martha Hill. Mac and Donna McClarty. And of course, we're thrilled to welcome Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton. This evening's event is a conversation between two former public officials who sought to work across partisan lines to achieve policy objectives. Governor Larry Hogan, a lifelong Marylander, announced his campaign for governor in 2014, focusing on a message of fiscal restraint for economic growth. He was overwhelmingly reelected in 2018. When COVID struck the United States in 2020, Governor Hogan led the nation's governors through the crisis as chairman of the National Governors Association. In Maryland, the governor combined decisiveness with ongoing adjustment through the twists and turns of the pandemic. He left office early this year with one of the highest approval ratings of any governor in the country. President Bill Clinton is the founder and board chair of the Clinton Foundation. He led Arkansas for nearly 12 years as the 40th and 42nd governor of the state. Then, as the 42nd president of the United States, he became the first Democratic president in 6 decades to be elected twice. He led the United States to the longest economic expansion in American history, including the creation of more than 22 million jobs. Facilitating the conversation between Governor Hogan and President Clinton is my colleague and friend, Stephanie Streett, the executive director of the Clinton Foundation. Now, please welcome to the stage, Stephanie Streett, Governor Larry Hogan, and President Bill Clinton.
Governor Hogan, you sit here in the middle. President Clinton, you get to sit there on the end. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your patience as we endured a little storm weather earlier. I think everything is passed now, so we are ready to get the program started. Jay, thank you for your kind introduction. Governor Hogan, welcome to Arkansas in our lovely stormy summer weather. And President Clinton, welcome back to your beloved home state. Before we get started, I wanted to see if you wanted to say a few words.
Well, first of all, I can't figure out whether this sizable crowd is a tribute to Larry Hogan's appeal or to your poor judgment about when it's safe to be outside, but I'm delighted you're here. I thought, just to set this up, I want you to hear from Governor Hogan. Let Stephanie ask whatever questions she wants to ask, but I'm glad to be here tonight with him, and I've known him for years, and I like him, and I'd like you to know why. Our last public event together before this night was at a dinner in Maryland honoring the longest serving senior Democrat in the country in the state Senate of Maryland. His name was Mike Miller. And he endorsed me for president in early 1991 because his Irish Catholic mother told him and her 9 other children that she thought they ought to be for me. And since Mike represented Clinton, Maryland, it seemed only appropriate that he would take a leading role. And he was a wonderful man. He was desperately ill. Everybody knew, including him, that he didn't have long to live. And we gave him a great dinner. And Larry Hogan was there. And I heard what he said, and I knew what he'd done as governor. And I thought, you know, there was still a place in America where a Republican and a Democrat could go for the same votes if we agreed on the same goals, and all our differences were how best to achieve them, which is, in theory, how democracy works best. So he's off on what may or may not be a reprisal of Don Quixote's tilting at windmills, but I think we need more people who are tilting at that windmill. So I'm glad he's here. And, Congressman, thank you for being here.
Well, Mr. President, thank you so much. It's really an incredible honor to be here tonight, and I'm amazed that all of you showed up. I mean, that was one heck of a storm. So I agree. I'm not sure about your judgment, but I'm very honored to have the opportunity to be with all of you tonight. Yeah, thank you for mentioning Mike Miller. You know, we're the adversaries. Was a Republican governor in what's arguably the bluest state in America, and sometimes we didn't always agree. We would passionately debate issues, but he was a wonderful man, and we had a terrific relationship. And I'll never forget that night. I was sitting in between this guy, Mike Miller, longest serving presiding officer in the country, and President Clinton, and boy, we had a lot of fun that night. It was a nice. It was. So thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, and thank you all for being here. I'm really excited to be with you tonight.
All right, well, I'm going to attempt to act as the moderator this evening. And Governor Hogan, my first question is for you. Could you tell our audience something about you that they don't already know?
Well, I'm not sure they know anything.
They heard your bio.
I heard that we sold out the Great Hall in the library, and I said that must have been because President Clinton was going to be in town, and they said, well, he's at a lot of these things, but they don't always sell out. So, I was like, I didn't think anybody in Arkansas knew anything about me, but look, I'm just a lifelong small business owner. I had never held elective office until I was elected in Maryland in 2014. We pulled the biggest surprise upset in America. But I've been involved in politics my whole life. I learned a lot about integrity and public service from my dad, who was on the House Judiciary Committee during the impeachment of Richard Nixon. He was the first Republican to come out for Nixon's impeachment. So I learned a little bit about putting the country first and doing the right thing, and putting aside just your own personal goals or your party pressures. But I spent my whole life in business. I ran for governor in Maryland because I just was fed up and frustrated. I felt like our state was heading in the wrong direction, and I put together a group called Change Maryland, which was the largest grassroots nonpartisan organization in state history. It was just as many Democrats and independents as there were Republicans. We don't have many Republicans in Maryland, but we pulled off a big upset, and then we went about trying to turn our state around. Again, we have a 70% progressive Democratic legislature, both houses. But, I worked together in a bipartisan way, reaching across the aisle, trying to find that middle ground where we could all stand together. And even though we sometimes came at solutions from a different angle, we agreed on what the problems were. And I always believed in compromise. And so I left office with most people in Maryland, whether they were Democrats or Republicans or independents, approving of the job that we did. And I'm proud of the ability to get things done across the aisle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
President Clinton, this may be a little tougher, but can you share one or two things with our audience they may not know about you?
God, can there possibly be anything left? Well, one thing that I think might be interesting now, that at least young people may not know, is that relates to the question we're all fretting about, which is why is there so much extremism in politics when a clear majority don't want it? When I was governor, before a lot of you were born, God, I hate it. I don't know what happened. Arkansas, well, let me back up and say we just celebrated is the wrong word, but the 30th anniversary of the Timothy McVeigh blowing up the Murrah Federal Building. And so a lot of people talked about it, and Jeffrey Toobin, the legal correspondent for CNN, wrote a book called Homegrown about the bombing. And he said that McVeigh was thought of as a crazy person then and deranged because he'd been abandoned by his father, by his mother. His mother and father split, and his mother took his sister, and he stayed with his father. And, for years, that was sort of the narrative that all this stuff happened to him and drove him around the bend. And Toobin said that's an insult to him. He was a very serious, militant white nationalist, and he wrote a political manifesto, which, if you read it today, sounds like the stated position of the furthest right white nationalists in the House caucus. And he said that's what they believed. And I say that because one of the reasons I think Little Rock is a vibrant place with a vigorous two-party debate system is that we've seen this movie before. And when I was governor, we had 4 encounters with violent nationalists. One was Gordon Call from North Dakota, who was the most violent tax resistor in America, and he moved from North Dakota down to Lawrence County. He got in a farm outside Walnut Ridge, and the FBI wanted him for tax evasion and other things, and they asked Gene Matthews, the sheriff, who was coincidentally my friend and county coordinator, to help him go out to Call's farm. And he was a smart man, and he had a farm that was out in an open field, so he could see all around. And when they went to arrest him, he killed Gene Matthews and was subsequently killed. Then we had I'm trying to remember the name of this guy, a guy in southwest Arkansas who was with the Covenant Sword and the Arm of the Lord, and he was stopped by a state trooper whose brother-in-law was on my detail. And the state trooper was black, but it probably didn't make a difference in this case. He was a state trooper. He stopped him for a routine traffic accident. He was in a sort of an SUV with darkened glass, and the SUV was a rolling armory. And he had lots of weapons, and he grabbed one and got out and killed the trooper. And then we had a big compound in North Arkansas, and the FBI wanted to do what it later did at Waco and Ruby Ridge. They wanted to charge it. And I said, before you do that, why don't we send a guy I know who did 2 tours in the jungle in Vietnam to fly over, and let's see what he says about this. Because all these people were, I remember the local CBS affiliate here had established a relationship with this huge armed compound. And they had 2 people in it who were wanted for murder. But they were in communication, and they would send women and children down to get food and medicine and go back up. But every one of these cabins they were in had a trap door, and you fell through the floor and you were in a foxhole. And there were already weapons and ammunition there. And there was literally a school bus full of weapons that was buried in the ground with the door facing up. So you just went out and pulled up the door and kept the ammunition going. And so this guy came back, and I got all the federal officials there, and he said, Governor, if these people can shoot at all, he said, I'm not talking about they're good shots. He said, if they know which end of the gun to hold and how to pull the trigger, you will lose 50 people if you charge this compound. So I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to cut them off of food stamps. And this guy said, you can't do that. You're a state official. I said, I know, sue me. And I said, it'll take a while to get it through the courts. I said, we're going to cut them off of food stamps, and we're going to, when people come down to get food and medicine, we're going to be nice to them and not at all hostile, but we're just not letting them go back. And we slowly turned up the heat, and before you know it, they surrendered. Nobody died, nobody got hurt. And then the Ku Klux Klan moved their national headquarters to Boone County. And I thought, God, what did I do to deserve this? And the first thing they wanted to do is come to UALR and march around the campus on University Avenue. They wanted a big march around the campus. And people were saying you shouldn't let them do it. I said, we can't. They got a right to come down here. They haven't broken any law yet. But I want to make sure they don't get hurt. So I want one National Guard person or one state trooper per demonstrator. And I want them to just walk around with them, be real nice to them, say, we're glad to have you here, but we'd hate it if anything happened to you. Because I didn't want any bad articles about, I didn't want another Little Rock Central High School. And then they left, and pretty soon the Ku Klux Klan relocated their headquarters. Now, why am I saying that? Because we talked about working together. Nobody wanted this state to become a violent haven then. Nobody took any pleasure, not from the most conservative Republican in my legislature to the most liberal Democrat. Nobody wanted anything but an end to the killing, and they didn't want the state taken over by crazy people who thought they had a right to shoot people when they were resentful. And it worked. And it may have worked because we got less coverage for it, not more. And if you don't know about it, that means it was successful, which is exactly the reverse of the way things work today, right? Larry and I were talking on the way where they keep saying now politics is a performance art. And I spoke at Marion Barry's funeral in Gillette, Arkansas yesterday. And I said, you know, the thing I like about Barry is he thought the art of politics was performance, not that politics was a performance art. So I want you to think about that.
Yeah, I don't come from the performance art school of politics. I come from the get to work and get things done school of politics, and I'll work with anybody to do the people's business. And I think most people today are really frustrated with kind of the far right or far left and all the arguing and yelling back and forth and the toxic, angry, divisive rhetoric. And most people really just want us to, I think they want their elected officials, regardless of their party affiliation, to sit down and work on common sense bipartisan solutions. I think it's really what most people are looking for today.
Well, as you both know, we're about to head into an election year, and I don't believe
I hadn't heard that.
I don't believe this room needs to guess where your politics are, but can you give us your view of the current, and you sort of did this already, but your view of the current political landscape in the United States? We'll start.
Yeah, I'm really concerned about where we are in America. I don't know that I've ever been more concerned. And, you know, I think that a huge portion of America considers themselves to be, they self-identify as moderate or left of center, right of center. And yet it seems like the angriest, loudest voices get all of the attention. And, you know, it shouldn't, you know, they don't represent the views of most people in America. And so I'm concerned about the Republican Party that, you know, we've now got 12 people running for president, and there's one seems to be getting nearly all, you know, more than half the votes, and nobody else getting any kind of traction. And my hope is that my party can return to a more Reagan-esque, you know, big tent party that can appeal to a broader group of people. We got to get back to winning elections again, and we don't get to govern if we just focus on relitigating the past and talk about stolen elections and, you know, covering up January 6th. And I think we need to focus on actually talking about the things people care about, like getting our economy on track and keeping our neighborhoods safe, and, you know, and improving our kids' education. But I think that's what we're not hearing about today.
Thank you. President Clinton, can you give us your sort of current vision on the political landscape?
I will betray my partisan background a little bit here. I completely agree with that. And when I ran in 92, basically the Republicans thought they had found a formula that would ensure the long-term dominance of the White House. And they had a 45% base vote, and we had about a 40% base vote. And that's because we got more interested in defending our programs than getting the results we said any progressive would want to get, which is broadly shared prosperity, and everybody gets a chance, no discrimination. And so we changed that and had some success, and I got reelected, and then we started doing better. And then things went kind of haywire. I think partly there was a real reaction in the far right to my election, and maybe worse, to President Obama's election. And the Tea Party started going crazy, and their argument was that government itself was inherently evil. President Reagan had a lot of great lines, some of which weren't so, about how government would screw up a two-car parade. But it would, he was kind of good-natured about it. But these people really hated government. And I knew we were in trouble when Bob Inglis, who was a conservative Republican congressman from South Carolina with 100% pro-life voting record and 100% NRA voting record, and a devout evangelical Christian, fell in his bathroom, got injured, and couldn't talk for 5 months, and was living out of a tube. And when he got to where he could talk again, he said, you know, I got a couple of things I want to say. I've always been honest with my constituents. First, I want to thank my colleagues, Democrat and Republican, who checked on me when I was sick and didn't know if I'd ever be able to come back to work again. Secondly, I assure you, I'm still a conservative Republican. I still think the private sector almost always works better than the government, and I'm still for free market solutions, but I have changed my mind on two things. I came here being told that we had to hate the Democrats and we had to show hatred. He came when Gingrich became Speaker, and he said, I think it's wrong for us to foment hatred of President Obama. He's a Christian, not a Muslim. He's an American, not an African. And as near as I can see, he's got a fine family and he loves this country just like we do. I just disagree with him on most things. But I will never promote hatred of him again. And he said, the second thing is, I think John McCain and our senior Senator Lindsey Graham are right that this climate change thing is a real problem and we need to do something about it. And we ought to be able to create millions and millions of jobs if we deal with it in a smart way. And because he wouldn't deny climate change and he wouldn't promote hatred of the president, he lost the Republican primary 71-29. And he was about as far right as you could get just on conviction votes on abortion and guns. And he came to see me a couple of years later. And he said, I want to apologize to you. He said, I ran for Congress because I hated you. He said, I believed all that stuff. I asked to be on the Judiciary Committee. Before you ever took the oath of office, I'd already determined I was going to vote to impeach you. We just had to find some reason. And he said, it's crazy. This is a terrible way to run a railroad. And he then started meeting once a month with the Democrat he defeated, who was the daughter of a former governor. And they meet once a month with equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats, and they find something they can agree on and then go out and figure out how they can promote it in South Carolina. I think we got to somehow get back to that. There's plenty of things to argue about if you can agree on the end.
You know, Mr. President, I agree with that. I think you can disagree without being disagreeable. We can passionately debate the issues without hating the folks on the other side. I think that's one of the things that's wrong with American politics today. It used to be, I use you and Ronald Reagan as an example when I'm talking about, Ronald Reagan worked with Tip O'Neill to get things done. You worked with Newt Gingrich to get things done. My dad used to be in Congress, and I remember, you could disagree on the issues, but they all got along. The families knew each other. They were friends. They went out to have a beer together. They had dinner together. Nowadays, it seems like you question somebody's patriotism. You attack them as a person. All this angry name calling back and forth. I think most people are completely fed up with politics as usual. And I think we got to get back to the old days when people actually used to sit down and work together.
I'll tell you a story. Mike McClarty sitting out there, he was my first chief of staff. We passed this
Good man.
incredible, we basically reversed trickle-down economics and passed this economic plan by a vote. And everybody said, because we got beat in 94 so bad, that I was history. And an executive, a man who had a big job in Ronald Reagan's White House, called Mike, and he said, and they were friends, and he said, I just have one question. It's an interesting question. He said, does Bill Clinton like working in the Oval Office? Sounds funny. He said, yeah. You remember when you told me that? He said, yeah, he loves it. He works there at night. He works there on the weekends. Sometimes he even goes back after dinner. He says he loves it there. He says, it's always full of light. And he said, well, a lot of people don't like it because there are too many doors coming in and because it is so light and so accessible. And he said, but Ronald Reagan loved it too. He said, he'll be reelected, don't worry. He said, it's a psychological thing, whether you believe politics is about inclusion or division. It's very interesting. But that diverse groups, even though we all have our convictions and it pains us to answer, believe this, diverse groups make better decisions than lone geniuses or homogenous groups. They just do. If we took the smartest person in this room tonight and put them in another room and gave them everything they wanted to eat and drink and comfortable and everything, and fed 10 questions in to the genius and 10 questions into the rest of us, and we had to get by for 2 days on cold coffee and stale buns, we'd make our decisions because we have more experience. And that's the fundamental issue in American politics today, I believe. You cannot have a predetermined ideological position, especially one that is fact-free. That is,
Not
designed-
fact-free.
All these things that your mother or daddy told you growing up turns out to be true. I remember one day I came home, I was so mad I could spit at a kid in grade school. And my mother said, "Billy made you mad, didn't he?" I said, "He sure did." He said, "You remember this, anybody that's only trying to make you mad is not your friend."
There's a whole lot of that going on today, just trying to make each other mad.
All right, we've obviously talked about the partisan divide that exists, but I'd like to focus a little bit on civility outside of politics, especially those that exist between people who may otherwise disagree about politics. And I can start. How about I'll answer the question
You go
first?
ahead.
Can I get two of my great friends sitting here in the audience, Congressman French Hill and Martha. They are such great supporters of the Clinton Center, the history, great supporters of the National Archives. We work together on so many things and focus on the things that we agree upon. And I hope that that's something we could all get back to. So I don't know if I stole your answer, but
That's a great answer. And it's really what I've based my whole career on. Like I said, I pulled off this surprise upset in the blue state. I in my first inaugural address, I said, the politics that have divided our nation need not divide our state. And it wasn't going to be the beginning of a divided government, but one of bipartisan cooperation. And I said I was going to let the best ideas rise to the top, regardless of which side of the aisle they came from. And even though sometimes we got into we disagreed really strongly on some issues, but I always kept it civil. And I think it's so important. I think you get a lot more done by listening to the other side. I was really outnumbered, but we came together. I convinced a 70% progressive Democratic legislature to cut taxes 8 years in a row by $4.7 billion. We turned our economy around. We came together on things that you wouldn't think we could come together on. And I think the civility is so critically important today. It's not just into politics. I mean, spilling over into everyday life with people yelling and screaming on social media at each other, cable news 24 hours a day. And I said earlier, the angriest, loudest voices get all the attention. I think we got to get back to the rest of us who are fed up with all of that and somehow find a way to put an end to it. Because civility and bipartisan cooperation is going to be the thing that gets us out of the mess we're in today.
Thank you.
Well, let's get to a practical deal. How would you apply this in your life and in your citizenship life? I think first you got to decide whatever game you're playing. What's your work life? If you're a coach, what's your coaching strategy? If you're a member of the House and you, like French Hill, you represent a district with a lot of voters on both sides and from one end to the other, how do you keep score? And I think we need to go back and ask ourselves, how do we keep score? Because we know the brain science is funny. We've got a lot of research on this. If I say something, if I tell a lie about Larry Hogan.
I hope you don't.
He's 6'8" and got long hair.
Don't lie about me. I tell the truth about you.
And I say it 1,000 times. And we're in a fight, an argument. If after I say it 550 times, one of our local news channels breaks a story that proves that I have not been telling the truth. And even if I was honestly mistaken, if I keep on doing it, then it becomes a lie, right? After 1,000 times, even if a majority of the people believe that it's not true, if enough people hear it, his approval rating will go down. People will think less of it. And they'll say, well, there must be something wrong with him. I've lived with all this. I know this. And I watched it on that stupid email thing. So I know what I'm talking about here. So why do you have to have some mechanism within every party to prevent the propagation of things we know are false? We'll just start with that. And I think that, that's a hill worth climbing. And if you depend, that's why I felt so bad about Kevin McCarthy being speaker. He said, I really want to be speaker, and so I'll have to let these people do a bunch of stuff that I know better than to let them do, but I can't get the votes otherwise. I felt bad for him. And so you have to say, how do I keep score? So Hillary and I have been talking about this for almost 50 years now. And I think the best way is to say the children have a better future, are people better off when you quit than when you started, and are things coming together instead of being torn apart? If you can answer those three questions, yes, then whatever else is left on the table and unsolved is a much better chance of it becoming solved. It's human. There will always be problems in human experience. There will always be jobs left undone. There will always be something for democracy to do. But I think we got into keeping score the wrong way, and I think we would all be well served if we were more explicit about how we keep score. Because if you're in a close race, if you can discredit, for example, the majority of American people don't like all this election denying, and that's the main reason that the Democrats had the best midterm performance in 40 years. But wait, but they didn't hold on to a majority because people thought we hadn't properly addressed the crime issue in a lot of places, and for other reasons. So, and I think that everybody ought to start thinking about how are we going to keep score here? And then you've got to give people permission to vote against you, in effect. You got to be willing to say things that say, I trust you to do this. And if we're trustworthy, our democracy will flourish. We're still in the best position of any country on earth to do well for the next 30 or 40 years. But we are driving ourselves into several blind alleys. One of them, I think, on immigration. Our birth rate is below replacement level. It's 1.7. It needs to be 2.1 per thousand to just have replacement. So does it make any sense to be anti-immigration? It does if you can scare people about, this, but the crime rate among immigrants is about half that of the native born, and the small business formation rate is twice that of the native born. And should there be regulations on immigration? Absolutely. Should there a limit to how many people we can take every year? Absolutely. But the budget for immigration administration, everybody says, oh, Biden hadn't done enough at the border. So if you got 2 million people showing up because things are going to hell in a handbasket everywhere else, and you only have enough money in the budget to process 400,000 people a year, what are you going to have? Chaos at the border, wall or no wall. So if you want a reasonable limit and you want preference given to people who either have skills that you need or who will go to places that need labor and be welcome, you can do all that if people have a decent place to live and you got enough folks there to process them in a relatively short period of time. And we have made a decision as a country that we'd rather have an issue than a solution. And right now it's hurting the Democrats, but it's not good for the country. This country was, and there's plenty of people of color in the Republican Party. You know, you can watch that. It's not like you can win arguments. One thing I like about George W. Bush, we fight like cats and dogs about things, but he is not scared of immigrants. And he believes that he could go to South Texas with me and we could debate for 2 or 3 days, and he thinks he could get enough votes to win an election. And the point is, and he deserves credit for that. He's not afraid of people because they come from different cultures, and he thinks it is wrong to demean people because of who they are. And I think that's a good thing. That's why we're.
Let me get a word in here, Mr. President.
I'm not doing my job. No.
Yes, we didn't get the question. I agree with you, and this is one of those issues where we keep talking past each other, and Republicans and Democrats trying to score points with one another instead of sitting down. Look, I think most Americans want a secure border and a pathway to citizenship. Look, Americans do. We can do both, and so sometimes the Democrats would just be talking about we're not focused on the security issue. Republicans only talk about stopping. We got to talk about both. And my wife is a first-generation immigrant. I happen to run in the most diverse state in the country. It's a majority-minority state. I got the same conservative Republican vote that Donald Trump did, but I ran 45 points ahead of him because I won Asians and Hispanics and got a huge percentage of the black vote. Republicans usually don't because we talked about issues and solutions. And so I don't think it's the Republicans versus Democrats. I think most people would like us to find a common sense solution. This is the greatest nation on earth. People still yearn to come here to become Americans. And we ought to find a way to fix the broken immigration system and secure the border.
All right, I'm going to switch gears here just a little bit, mix it up.
Yeah, let's
All
switch
right.
gears.
Governor Hogan, you've left office just a few months ago. Tell us a little bit about what you've been up to since then.
Well, I've been trying to learn how to drive again. 8 years of driving around with the state troopers. I'm sort of like a 16-year-old with a learner's permit. I'm spending a lot more quality time with my 3 daughters, my wife, and my 5 grandkids. Okay. And I'm trying to continue to be, even though I'm not in elective office, and I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. President, to be here with you. I just want to be a voice of reason of trying to get us back to solve some of these issues and bring the country together. That's my avocation. That's my hobby. I'm just trying to continue to focus on these things. I think it's so important to the country.
President Clinton, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing as the world has emerged from COVID.
I got elected governor before we had term limits 5 times just so people could keep me from driving. No telling how many votes I got to just keep me off the highway. We work here, as you know, at the library with Jose Andres World Central Kitchen and fed meals to people who needed them, about 780,000. And then we got over 1 million when the Agriculture Department, and Trump was president, they didn't stop the Agriculture Department from boxing up meals that would allow a family of 3 or 4 to get enough, a big box that they could live out of for 3 or 4 days. So we got over 1 million meals. And then in the rest of the world, we helped India with an oxygen shortage. We helped the World Health Organization get the poorest countries ready to deal with it. We did what we could. It was a humbling thing. And Hillary will tell you in some ways it was the best time of our lives because our daughter's a public health expert, and New York had people dying like flies, so our family moved into our little guest house next door, and for 2 years, our grandchildren told us what we were going to do every day. And it was great.
Can you tell us a little bit about, a lot of people are excited and energized by the fact that you brought CGI back. Can you talk a little bit about why you did that and what we could look forward to maybe this fall at CGI?
Yeah, I hope you'll come this year.
No pressure.
Sounds like pressure.
Look, The whole idea behind CGI is that there's enough meetings where people just talk and don't do. And you can get, it's satisfying press for a day or two, but nothing happens. So we started having a meeting where you were expected, if you wanted to come back the next year, to make some commitment to do something. There was no minimum amount you had to spend, but you had to do something. And so I had no idea if people would brave New York traffic in UN week and pay a little admission fee to spend more money and time solving the problems of the world. But it turned out that they did, and it worked. And then we stopped in 2016 because we had to, because we couldn't conduct it without foreign sponsors. And I knew that if Hillary had been elected, we couldn't do it because I couldn't be a conflict. And when President Trump got elected, I knew to a virtual certainty that they'd go after anybody that helped us continue it. So 2021, we were having dinner outside in New York in one of those little plastic or laminated containers, you know, you had. And these two total strangers walked by and said, "When are you going to bring back CGI? We need something to get together on." Just out of the blue. And so we decided to have it, and we had it again last year. And we had 25% more commitments than we did the last year we held it in 2016. And we're going to have it again this year. We cut the admission fee by 75%. And so we could bring more young people from around America and around the world. And it's exhilarating. And all we do is just get people who know things and people who can fund it. One thing that you could probably all identify with is we had a man named David Feigenbaum, who is a doctor, former college football player, big jock, developed a very rare form of cancer. They told him he was going to die. He couldn't possibly survive. And he decided that there might be drugs that had already been approved by the FDA, which could help it, his condition. And he tried 3 times and failed. The third time, he nearly died.
He spent 6 months here at UAMS, he told me as well.
Yeah, and then the 4th time, he found a cure. And he seems to be well. He's been well for several years now. And he spends his life trying to enroll in a privacy-protected site. He now has 20 million names, but there are 30 million Americans alone and lots of others overseas who have orphan diseases. That is, there aren't a lot of people who have their disease, but when you add them up, there's a whole bunch of them. And the theory is that if you can analyze what's in the cancer genomically and measure it against what's in the medicine, you can save lives, and that's what they're doing. So that's the kind of thing. And, you know, we just try to get him some more support, and he got some more support. And that's what people do. They just show up and try to find people who'll identify with whatever they're trying to do.
Well, thank you for that great work. It's one I'm really passionate about, cancer. You know, that's one of the things people probably don't know about me, but 5 months after being sworn in, I got hit with life-threatening cancer that had spread all over my body. And I governed the state from a hospital bed about getting 24-hour-day chemotherapy for several months. And I just, you know, I looked at life differently. I figured out what was really important. I saw people going through much tougher battles. But we invested in $230 million into building a new cancer center in Prince George's County, right outside of Washington, another one in Baltimore, putting more money into research. And, you know, we're home to the NIH and the FDA and Johns Hopkins. And, you know, they're making incredible leaps. They're going ahead by leaps and bounds with immunotherapy. And we are going to find some cures to a lot of these life-threatening, life-changing diseases. And thank you for putting more money into it and helping people that are going after these orphan diseases. And it's something I'm going to continue to be passionate about.
Well, with this large crowd here, we've had several people submit questions ahead of time. So I have
all 1,400?
I have time for a few. So President Clinton, talk a little bit about what is the largest threat you currently see to our democracy?
That we will willingly give it up. I mean, you know, and I'm not talking about who wins the next election. I'm talking about whether we have good, honest elections and that the redistricting lines are more or less fairly drawn, and whether the information voters need is readily available to them. And I'm really worried about everywhere in the world, the information ecosystem, if you will, being compromised by the penetration of, social media sites that may be just bots and trolls, and also just the loss of small town newspapers and independent radio stations. When I was starting out running for Congress in 1974, I didn't have a nickel when I began. But every little town had its own newspaper. Every little town had its own radio station, and they were all independently owned. And at least half of them, maybe more, in this congressional district belonged to Republicans. But they were glad to see if you showed up, and they'd ask questions and you'd answer them, and people could make up their own mind. And it was somehow normal. And I worry now that we are being prepared to shut down and stop listening to people we ought to listen to, stop hearing things we ought to hear. And that's not a good thing. Even if they agree with me all the time, it can't possibly be right. Hillary's mother lived with us till she died in her early 90s. And she was the most liberal person in our family. She forced herself to listen to Fox News an hour a day. And I said one time, Dorothy, how can you stand this? So look at her. She said, first of all, nobody's wrong all the time. And secondly, if they're not right, I have to know how to answer. I have to listen to other people. And, that's pretty good advice for all of us.
I would agree. I think it's the biggest threat to democracy is the threats to democracy. And the fact that we've got this divided politics that are so torn apart. I'm hopeful that I really think there's more that unites us than divides us, but boy, is it divisive and angry out there. And it's exacerbated by social media and by, disinformation. And then you add on top of that, it's going to potentially accelerate with AI. And we've got cyber threats from China and Russia that are also taking advantage of some of these things. So there are a lot of threats out there, but can't really fix all the problems until we fix the basic problems that are happening with our political process.
Well, that was a good segue to my next question from our audience, was talking a little bit about your thoughts on social media and its effects on politics and how you think artificial intelligence will impact society.
Yeah, well, sorry, I stepped on the next
That's
question.
Okay. You answered a little bit, but let's go further.
I like anything, there's the good and bad. When I was underfunded challenger, I was outspent, I think 7-1 in my race for governor in a state where no Republican could actually ever win. And I watched President Obama use social media. I was like, I got to learn about this social media. I started a Facebook page, and I had no money for television. I was out. It was grassroots, shoe leather, meeting voters one-on-one. But I also started putting out the things, the messages, the things that I thought were important, and we started growing with lots of hundreds of thousands of people following for free social media. So it's a good way. It was like grassroots politics on steroids. You could meet more people really fast. However, now it's gone so far where we have these echo chambers and people only listen to the people that agree with them 100% of the time. Ronald Reagan said your 80% friend is not your enemy. But we just talk to people that agree with us. There's disinformation. Some of it is just disinformation. People believe in things that aren't true, but some of it is actual China and Russia putting out disinformation. And so I think AI, we have great opportunities to make advancements in medicine and all kinds of other things that could be great. It's going to transform our economy like the internet did. It's also going to just be disruptive and cost jobs. And there's potential for evil. It can be really bad, and we've got to be careful and watch out for it.
Clinton?
I agree with all that. I think that you have to play with the tools that are in the game. So I think we should have social media presence. We should say affirmatively what we're for. If someone attacks us, we should give a respectful but firm response if there is one. If we make a mistake, we ought to fess up. But I think that we shouldn't be all back and forth. You should remember that the most irresponsible people gain when they can take the election away from people and make it about who's most effective at slamming the politicians on the other side. The last time I checked, there were no perfect people, including politicians. But the people will be affected differently by different decisions made in campaigns. So the most important thing is to realize when the goal of your adversary on social media is to stop people from thinking, get them to hate other people, and make sure that the issues are totally irrelevant to how most people would live. And, you know, the charitable term for that is branding. But so I believe you have to contend. It's like a daily debate that never gets over. But if you're not careful, you get so convinced that everybody is in some camp or another that you believe it's pointless to make an argument, pointless to raise an issue, pointless to give new information to people. And that's devastating, because that only helps the people who are trying to turn the politicians into two-dimensional cartoons and to get people to vote on cartoons instead of what's good for their kids and their future. So you can't give up on us. It's just, like Larry said, there's some assets to it and a lot of liabilities. But the most authoritarian leaders are the ones that are trying to make sure that they just turn us all into a herd. You know, and it's good to be in a crowd. It's good to belong to a clan. It's good to be tribal, but you should be inclusively tribal, not exclusively tribal. So you got to keep making the arguments too, what's good, what needs to be done.
I want to focus on kids for a moment. And for both of you, how do you recommend that we teach our children and our young people about the importance of civic engagement in civic dialogue when the current political environment feels so toxic right now?
I want to take my hat off to both of you, because I know that that's something that you guys are focusing on, civic engagement with young people and teaching them the importance. Look, that's one thing that makes me hopeful for the future, actually. As crazy as it is and as divisive as it is and as frustrating as it is to watch cable news and look at this craziness on social media and see the people getting Twitter likes and the performative politicians and angriest voices and all that. But I've spent some time with young people, and I think, you know, it gives me hope for the future, because they are starting to pay, instead of giving up, saying, you know, I don't want anything to do with this. They're starting to get engaged, and it's on both sides of the aisle. They're young people that are saying, we've got to fix this. And they are the ones that are going to. So, you know, I thank you for the work that you're doing on civic engagement with people, and I think it's critically.
Well, look at what George W. Bush and I do in the Presidential Leadership Scholars Program. He picks 30 people a year, I pick 30 people a year. They're more or less evenly divided by politics and every other demographic group you can consider. And I tell people all the time that it's sort of my symbolic partnership was when these two grisly Iraq and Afghan war veterans who were heavily decorated, and both of them had lost a leg to roadside bombs. And they were involved in trying to help injured veterans rebuild their lives. Told me how grateful they were that our side had picked an African-American woman who was head of the gay rights movement in Little Rock at the time to be one of our people. They said, you know, We learned so much from her. She's got the skills that we need to do what we're trying to do. She's now, I think, living in North Carolina. But the point is, they didn't have time to worry about whether it was a bad thing or a good thing she was a lesbian, because they were focused on the future. She knows something that I can use. Maybe we know something she can use. That's what I wish you would think about. I mean, I think every day is an adventure. Everybody you meet is something worth knowing about. Will you meet people you think on balance or destructive or dangerous? You might. But most people are way better than they get credit for in a world where our first response is to turn people into a cartoon. Most people are three-dimensional people. And we ought to resist the cartoons and look at the people and treat them that way.
Well, as we approach the end of our time tonight, we're going to do something really fun.
Fun?
Really fun. Well, fun for me, and we've never done this at our Kumpuris Lecture before, but we're going to have what I call a lightning round.
You understand the concept of lightning round, Mr. President?
Dude, I saw it last night. I thought I was going to visit it early.
We did have a lightning round. So what's going to happen is I'm going to quickly ask you both a series of questions. So keep your answers kind of succinct.
I gotcha.
Gotcha? Okay. Start with you, Governor Hogan. Tell us what you miss most about being governor.
Well, I miss my team, being around the people. I also miss through the airports.
President Clinton, what do you miss most about being president?
Nearly anybody will come play music for you. And I miss the job. On the worst days, there was something good you could do. On the worst days, there was something good you could. I loved it. It's like peeling an onion that never had an end of layers.
Yeah, that's true.
And President Clinton, what do you miss the least? What do you miss the least about being president?
What do you miss the least?
All the junk that's not on the level. And I don't mean, I never minded being criticized. I like getting into arguments. And I never minded being opposed. But I hate it when people assume a position of sanctimony when basically they're just trying to get an advantage. You know, it's not good. On the level. I like things that are on the level.
Yeah, I don't miss the angry attacks and the people calling you names all the time. It's like, and they still do, but I don't really care anymore.
Governor, tell us what your most underappreciated accomplishment was as governor.
Well, I think, I mentioned earlier, I think we actually did get some appreciation for, the bipartisan success and working together across the aisle. But I don't think people realize I was only the second Republican to be reelected in the entire 246-year history of our state.
Wow.
So I was the only second Republican in 246 years to be reelected.
President Clinton, in your lifetime, what's your most underappreciated accomplishment thus far?
Yeah, top that one.
I got Hillary to stay with me for 48 years.
That's a good one.
Okay. Who is the most impressive President Clinton, U.S. or world leader that you've dealt with? The most impressive?
It's a very hard question, but I think the Mandela and Rabin were, in their own ways, truly great. And I love them both very much, and I still miss them.
U.S. or world leader, Governor Hogan?
Well, that's a hard one. And with all due respect, Mr. President, I would say Ronald Reagan and Pope Francis.
Oh, that's a good one.
Pope Francis.
Pope Francis, that's a good one.
Oh, Pope Francis was our first Jesuit pope, and since I went to Georgetown, I'm the closest you've gotten to a Catholic president since. since Kennedy until Biden got elected.
Okay, President Clinton, who is the most humorous U.S. or world leader you've dealt with?
I think many of the Irish, they fill me with jokes continuously, and I like them. And Jean Chrétien, the Prime Minister of Canada, is funny as all get out. He comes from a family of 19 children, and he's one of the longest prime ministers in Canadian history. It is incredibly able, but he managed to laugh at everything. He said, if you grew up hungry with 19 kids in the family, what can you be upset about?
Well, I'm going to give a bipartisan answer, and I'll say, this guy, Bill Clinton, is pretty funny. And George W. Bush is also funny. So the
Yes,
two of
he
them,
is.
I'm bipartisan, go across the aisle.
Yeah, I think Bush is funny. Alan Simpson's funny. It's really funny.
President Clinton, tell us what your favorite hobby is right now.
My favorite hobby?
Your favorite hobby.
I think my favorite hobby right now is reading things that will make me feel better about the future. Learning things. I like to learn things. We got our second dinosaur exhibit
Thank you.
at the library this year. The dinosaurs ruled the world for 100 million years. We've been around, they were wiped out by a meteor hitting the Yucatan 66 million years ago. One of 5 extinction events in the history of planet Earth. All the others were basically from internal activities. We've been around 200,000 plus years, and our pre-human ancestors, maybe 250,000, 2.5 million, 3.5 million years. Lucy's bones in Ethiopia, 3.5 million years old. Anybody seriously think we're going to make it 100 million years if we keep behaving the way we are? That's what I think about. I had a good time being alive, and I'm still having a good time. And I would like for it to go on as long as possible for as many people as possible. And I'm trying to figure out how to do it. And I think I recommend it to you.
Your favorite hobby?
I don't have too many hobbies, but now that I'm unemployed, politics is my hobby, I guess, and hanging out with the grandkids.
Well, again, you keep stealing my questions. I'm going to throw it to you because I'd like to know the best moment of being a grandfather.
Well, actually, the best moment for me was last weekend. I had all 3 of my daughters and 3 son-in-laws, 5 grandkids over to a backyard pool. We had a 1-year birthday party, and I got to spend quality time for like 3 days, just spending time with the grandkids. It was great.
President Clinton.
Watching them come alive to the world and hearing them say something that is wonderful. I mean, it's very difficult to be skeptical about the future of humankind if you just listen to kids, I think. And it means the world to me. If I could spend the rest of my life spending 4 hours a day with them every day, I'd do it, but they would be so bored with me, I couldn't keep up. But when they do make time for me in their life, it's very happy.
So finally, I'm going to ask you both, start with you, Governor Hogan, what is your greatest hope for the United States humanity?
Well, first of all, thank you again for having me tonight. I really think this is an important discussion, and it is my greatest hope for humanity that we can actually, bring people together and do something about this broken, toxic politics in America. That's my greatest hope. We can bring America back together again.
Me too, for America and the world. There is now, however long people have been around, however long life on Earth has been around, overwhelming evidence that cooperation works better than conflict, that reconciliation works better than revenge, that conversion works better than cancellation. In other words, addition and multiplication are better than subtraction and division. And that's the most important thing. You can dress it up 50 different ways from Sunday, but when it comes right down to it, the distinguishing characteristic of our species on earth is that we have both consciousness and a conscience. And our capacity to overcome adversity and continue to advance is unlimited unless the arrogance about our consciousness overcomes the humility that our conscience will.
Well, I want to thank you both for a fascinating conversation.
Thank you very much.
And it's now my pleasure to ask my friend and colleague Alex Thomas, who's the Assistant Dean of the Clinton School, to say a few words to conclude our program. Alex?
Thank you all, and thank you all for coming out tonight. My name is Alex Thomas. I'm the Assistant Dean of the University of Arkansas Clinton School of Public Service. We're a graduate school in the U of A system. We have our Master's of Public Service degree. Feel free to applaud, yes. And we have a Master's of Public Service degree, as well as 4 concurrent degrees in public health, social work, law, and business. And we're located right down the street on the grounds of the Clinton Center. I work there every day, and I want to thank you all for being here. Thank the crowd as well. I also want to say this, I've been to a lot of these lectures and programs over the years, and I think for a lot of us, the things that make a good program are if we feel encouraged, if we feel challenged, if we feel some laughter along the way, and if we feel like there's a call to something better. And I want to congratulate and thank the 3 of you for enabling that to come together in this space for me, and I think for everyone in this room. We needed this. Our country needed this, our world needed this, to see the 2 of y'all especially come together as friends on policy, on family, on friendship, on all of that. And it's a great example. And even in the pouring rain and the hail and tornado warnings and all of that, this crowd showed that we needed this. Yeah. This is a topic that people are going to come out for, regardless of what the media and the trolls and everyone will scream about. You all are the example of, under crazy conditions, you all came out because this is what we need. So thank you again for that. Specifically, I want to thank President Clinton. I want to thank Governor Hogan. I want to thank Stephanie for her great questions. I also want to thank Secretary Clinton for coming and being a part of the group as well. We're grateful. I also want to thank the generous sponsors of this event that enable us to all come together in the rain and the hail. The Kumpuris family, we appreciate all that your family's done for the city, and we're grateful that this lecture series continues to be something that can contribute and pour into our lives. So thank you for the Kumpuris family. Thank you to the Clinton Foundation. Yes. Thank you to the Clinton Foundation. Applause. Thank you, AT&T. Thank you, the Clinton Presidential Center. And thanks to my colleagues and students and staff at the Clinton School for coming out and being a part of this. I also want to thank all the volunteers and all the event staff that helped put this on, especially with the changing of location, the weather, the rearrangement, the timing. The staff, y'all worked and did a great job getting the seats up and everything set up. Thank you. And I just want to thank you all for joining us tonight, those both in person and online. And lastly, I want to give an additional shout out to those new enrolling Clinton students and alumni. Some of y'all are here. I've seen some alums and some new students who've come to the audience, as well as the many Clinton students and alum who are watching online from literally around the world. June and July at the Clinton School means it's time for international public service projects where students fan out all over the world working with public service organizations to bring solutions to spaces that need them. Right now we have students in over 10 countries. We've been in over 93 countries over the last 17 years of our existence. And right now it's time for us. So shout out to all those students and alums from the Clinton School in the crowd. That said, in closing, I'll say this. I'll again thank the crowd, and I'll put out, I'll kind of echo perhaps a call to action that the group gave us earlier. Let's reach out to people that are outside of our orbit a bit. Let's connect with people that might be a bit different from us and just listen. Let's exchange names, shake hands. Let's build that community. There are actions that we can take. There are actions you all have already taken tonight by being here. And I encourage you all to walk out this room with these actions in mind as you engage the world and build a better world. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for being here tonight.
We'll just cross that way. We're going to go out.